Hey everyone, welcome to another week of Mental Health Mondays. I am your host, Matt Novak. I'm the creative director of Emergence, and we owe a great debt of gratitude to my buddy Phil Bracco, the pastor of Care and Counseling at Emergence Church, for really making this work and answering all my silly questions about mental health and anxiety and what we might be going through in this crazy time of COVID-19 quarantine lockdown. So, Phil, how are you?
Nice. I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm
good.
good.
You don't hear that a lot anymore. You hear, oh,
I know.
I'm tired, or oh, I'm super anxious, or oh, I'm depressed, or some people are pumped. I have a lot of friends who I think are preppers. I think they're reveling in
The
this.
zombie apocalypse. Yeah, no, no. I know this does it does feel a little bit like a sci-fi movie right now.
Yeah, you know what's weird is like there's all these, um, kind of dystopian future, post-apocalyptic movies and they're crazy, right? And it's like the world crumbles and you've got either zombies or viruses or whatever. What those movies never show is like a millions of people just kind of like hanging out in their homes getting bored like a
Yeah,
hamster on a
that'd be a
wheel.
pretty boring movie.
It would be pretty boring, but it's so
I guess
relevant
it
right
could be
now, you
interesting
know?
depending upon the family that you track with. Yeah,
Sure. So
good
this
movie.
week is going to be a quick hit because I do have to. I've got to run down to Totowa and make sure that we have Easter and Good Friday services ready to go.
I do.
So we're gonna keep this short, and we're actually gonna stick to that. So maybe like 20 minutes.
Okay.
But I would love to. Last week we got into some like really practical things at the end, and I think it would be cool. You mentioned maybe having some practical tips for people to maybe stay rooted in the word, um, stay true to the people who Christ wants us to be in this moment. Um, and part of that is just kind of making sure that our mental health is in check. We're aware of it. We're kind of tracking with it. So where do you want to start?
Um, I feel like praying for us real quick.
Oh, that
Actually,
would be amazing. Yeah.
why don't we do that? Lord God, we love you and praise you and ask even right now that as we talk about things that are practical and how to stay rooted in you, Lord, that you would, or that you would bless our time, that you would bless all those who are listening, that you would speak to them um, in a way that meets them where they're at and comforts them, Lord. Um, that you would allow this to be a practical time, and that we would know that you're here with us even right now. Whenever anybody's listening to this, Lord, that you would meet them here. So, Lord, lead us in this time in Jesus' name. Amen. Yeah,
Oh,
um,
amen. I was muted. You missed my
oh, you
amen.
are.
So
Thanks. Um, you know, it's interesting, man. Like one of the things that, because when I'm seeing clients, a lot of times, whether they're Christian, not Christian, I oftentimes when I've got to meet them where they're at, and depending upon where people are at spiritually, um, I've got to be cautious about how hard I hit them, let's say, or where I engage when it comes to things spiritual, because I don't know how that affects them yet, and but the reality is that because there's this idea that as a counselor I've got to make sure not to impose my agenda, my
yeah.
ideas,
Okay.
my worldview onto other people. I've got to meet them where they're at in their worldview and allow them to be honest, feel safe enough to, because that's the only way that they're going to be able to take ownership. And but when it comes to, um, as a counselor, uh, you know, and just personally, I think out of all the tools and the things that I've got, that I've learned along the way when it comes to mental health, when it comes to emotional health, um, just even personally in terms of applying these things, because, uh, I like to say, This is for the people with addiction that I work with. I smoke what I sell. You know, I mean, like if I'm going to help other people, you know,
So essentially, you've got a nice little toolbox of mental health things built up.
yeah, right. Like you end up wanting what works best practically. You know, not that it's going to work best with every personality. You know, you're gonna offer other people, but I'm just saying that out of all the tools that I have been able to benefit from or use personally, I think, you know, at the end of the day, nothing's changed me like the gospel. Nothing's changed me like the renewing of my mind through God's word. You know, I could have, because all of these tools, you know, and tricks, they might be good, you know, in terms of the physiology of your body, in terms of making logical sense of things, allowing headway in healing in certain areas. But, you know, but the source of power, the source of healing, you know, where transformation, you know, I think of that word metamorphosis in the Bible, you know, we're new creations, you know, you know, the old is gone, the new has come. That only happens by being connected to the vine. It only happens by Christ's power in us. And so all of these, as research as they are, scientific as they are, gimmicks, you know, in comparison, you know, like meaning separated from the source and the root, you know, they're dead branches.
Well, I
And
think
they're
what's
not.
interesting about what you're saying too is like, um, that is the source and that's the root. In the same way, um, if you have a headache and you take Advil, maybe it fixes the headache, but you haven't necessarily addressed why you have the
Yeah.
headache.
Yeah.
In the opposite, like in the positive, the gospel is that fixer of the root always.
Yeah. That's great.
And we could do all those really cool physiological things, which are amazing that we talked about last week, like if you're in the middle of an anxiety attack and you need to lower your heart rate or you're
Mhm.
just kind of like losing control. But if you're not, right, pushing back into your daily reading and your prayer and those kinds of things that are prompting you to make real life changes, you're you're going to be doing a lot of box breathing and a lot of holding ice packs, right? Like,
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly. You know, in that regard, I like to think of it as so root causes and symptom, you know, we can relieve symptoms and we can relieve roots, you know, or we can heal or deal with the roots. And I always think of the illustration of like driving in a car, and let's say the alignment's off in the car, and the alignment being off, you know, it kind of drags you to the right, you know, when you're driving, you know, um, if it's, let's say these are the symptoms, if it's a small intensity of symptoms, you know, you can deal with a little drag, no big deal. You know, you drive in the car and it's just a little tug, not barely notice it, you know, if you just, it's only if you let go of the wheel, you see that it goes to the right, you know. But if those symptoms, you know, or the root exacerbates, gets more intense, you know, goes unaddressed, we ignore it, you know, the symptoms are likely to get worse. Are you okay there? You look frozen. Oh yeah, no, you're just being still.
yeah, I was actually just seeing if I could be still enough to get you to think I was frozen.
Wow, that's okay. It
No,
worked.
I'm intently listening to you.
Okay, I know. I just thought you were frozen for a second. So like, if the symptoms are worse, you know, it starts to be a bigger drag, and that drag, if it's intense enough, can get exhausting. You know, so symptom management would be just keeping the car on the road. You know, but when those symptoms get really intense, you know, and when the root's not being addressed, you know, yeah, and this can be, you know, we can be addressing symptoms through symptom management, like we talked about belly breathing, dealing with physiology last time, the video camera, not the commentator, you know, a ton of different things, you know, to deal with symptoms. But we're going to expend a lot of energy if we're not dealing with the root, constantly keeping that car on the road, you know. Um,
Which
so
is
in your,
ultimately like not, if we're going to take that metaphor to life, right? You're spending all of your energy just staying on the road. You're
Mhm.
not spending your energy focusing on your destination or all the things you're passing or like enjoying
Yeah,
that present moment or living that present moment for Christ.
yeah, taking the metaphor, you know, enjoying the conversation with the person next to you, you know, or you know, yeah, being able to enjoy the scenery or pray, you know, because you're just like, I don't want to die, you know, like you're keeping this thing
Yeah,
on
for
the
sure.
road, you know. And I think if what happens, a lot of people, and from what I understand, you know, America is like number one with ER care, or like we're up there at the top in the world, you know, ER, but we're really low when it comes to preventative medicine, We're not that
Yeah.
great. And so congestive heart failure is happening all over the place, whatever. So, and great, we know how to treat a heart attack, but we have a lot of heart attacks. So people let their symptoms go, and then it's like, oh, our marriage is falling apart. Oh, you know what? I'm panic attacks all over the place, or things going, let me go see a counselor. Let me go talk to somebody because now it's an emergency. I don't know if we're going to make it, or I'm going to get through this. And, but if we're, the root typically is dealt with by forming habits, rhythms. It's not cutting corners. It's over time, pursuing health and life. And, and I think in that regard, the more that we deal with the root of things, the less intensely that drag is gonna pull on the wheel, the less energy we're gonna spend, and hopefully, we don't have to take the car to the shop to get it fixed because this thing is run down, it can't work, and so I think that's one of the things that, like right now, I think the first thing that I was just thinking about in this is what does it look like for us to prioritize? I know for me, I'm a recovering, I struggle with addiction, alcohol. I got sober back in 2001, and but that sobriety journey for me, I barely made it. Those first few years were grueling. They were really hard, and there was a lot of work that I was doing, from, let's say, coping, and trying to figure out, how to get my general, health and everything. I was trying to just improve, but it was a very slow and steady process. One of the things that really changed my life was, well, becoming a Christian, definitely. But after becoming a Christian,
thanks for tacking that on there.
yeah, I became a Christian after that. But after becoming a Christian was, this verse, because I was making it so complicated. Matthew 6:33, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. And just this idea that, oh, wait, I've got one thing to focus on, one thing. And if I just focus on that one thing, I've got one job, one thing every day. I had one job now.
If you had one job.
Yeah. Like, then everything else is like, if I focus, if the sun is in its right place, all the other planets, are in alignment. If I just focus on that one thing, all the planets fall into alignment, and
I think part of that too is like changing our expectation too of what alignment is, right? Like, and maybe that's we could talk for hours on expectations, but if the right now, especially like while we're all stuck inside or missing our friends or not able to go to work or maybe don't have work, the expectation isn't if I pray every day and read my Bible, God's going to align things my way. It's, God's going to align things in the way that's best for me.
Yeah. What is it? I forget the verse. It's in Jeremiah. But blessed is the man, who meditates on his law, on his word, day and night. He's like, a plant that in drought and in heat, and in when I forget, when the weather's bad, when the weather's good,
I think we got it.
You're producing fruit and leaves are growing. And so it's like, our circumstances, we're not the first to go through a crisis. This is the first of its kind that, we're alive for, but I think it's okay to accept, we don't want to sugarcoat the reality. We don't want to over spiritualize. We want to take cues from God's word and as to what we can expect from his promises. It doesn't mean he's going to change our circumstances. It doesn't mean that loved ones might not die. It doesn't mean that we're not going to suffer, or that, but what is the hope that I have, and how am I going to him to draw hope from him in that, rather than changing my, my view of what reality is or what God's like in order to fit what I want.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear you say like sugarcoat. We don't want to sugarcoat what's going on, but we also don't want to do that with the gospel either, right? Like I think of that, what's that Mary Poppins line, spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
Go down.
Like I don't want
I was hoping you'd sing it.
and I know you don't want it either, is like the work we do at Emergence to, hopefully be a part of God, spreading the gospel everywhere. We don't want that gospel to be the spoonful of sugar that
Hmm.
helps everyone deal with their lives. Like the gospel is transformative.
Hmm.
And it's not just a cover over this where it's like, yo, you can be okay being miserable inside because Jesus is there. It's like, no, this can actually be powerful enough to transform my entire situation. Like
Hmm.
this can be powerful enough to make me figure out how I can help the people in my neighborhood or my community, or be the person that my family can lean on because I'm so filled up with the spirit inside of me. I mean, it doesn't, obviously we're going to fail at all that stuff too, but um
Well, I was thinking about this. No, finish. Sorry. Were you done?
there's a bunch of dirt bikes riding around outside my house, so I'm just going to leave it on mute and let you go.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about this the other day, and I don't know. I'm going to risk processing, a thought out loud here, but but just the idea that the church has always, you know, grown the most under persecution. And right now we're under a different kind of persecution. We're locked in our homes. We can't really come out, and it's not people that are oppressing us. Okay, it's a biological. Um, but we the light in us has an opportunity to shine, brightest under persecution and under these circumstances when we're suffering. Because people are looking for hope, and there's a ton of people without hope. There's a ton of people with some symptom management, a lot of symptom management, and a lot of you know, uh, a lot of things that can be helpful to a point. But when you're asking real questions about big questions, about life and about meaning and about the reason for suffering, or about God, the hope that we have in light of it, I think um, that's where we have an opportunity in relying on that to really have our lives point to Jesus. So I just thought, taking care of ourselves, one of the things that I thought is just good to remember during this time, is something like the Serenity Prayer. Just for ourselves. So Serenity Prayer is something that in AA rooms, NA rooms, all around, something they pray, even though a lot of them don't pray to Jesus if it's secular, at the end of every meeting. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think there's a longer version, but that's the general.
Yeah, that compact version is good. I'm glad it wasn't the Seinfeld version, which is Serenity Now, Insanity Later.
Yeah.
Can you say that prayer for me again though?
Yeah. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah. That last one is what ties it together, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's hard, and sometimes I think we need to be careful if we're going too hard on one side or the other. Like, if we're serenity to accept the things I cannot change. If I relax too much on how much I think I can't change, I'm going to freeze or maybe be naive in terms of the precautions that I really should be taking to protect myself and others in this season right now. So the wisdom is so important. And if I think that it all depends on me, and I'm reading everything on the news, and I'm just going crazy looking, I'm spiraling in my anxiety reading everything, then really I might need to say, hey, there's a lot going on out there that you can't control, and I need to meditate on some things and think about some things that are going to build me up emotionally and help me get some stability so that I can be an emotional resource for my family and not just depleted and anxious and stir crazy.
Yeah, I will say that, and this will be my closing remark, and I'll let you kind of finish up after this. But I want people to know that there's not a lot you're going to learn from a medical standpoint by listening to the news, 16 hours a day. So if that's stressing you out, don't feel guilty about skipping it. Skip it for a day or two and get a break, and just like tell yourself, I'm going to spend a day not on my phone, not on the TV. The stuff I'm going to take in is going to be the gospel. The
Yeah.
stuff I'm going to put out is going to be prayers and good vibes. It's like, it's a good start right there.
Are we close to 20 minutes? Where are we at? Are you muted?
This doesn't have a countdown timer on it, so I'm not sure. We're at I think we started 30 minutes ago. But yeah,
Okay.
so
All right.
if
So
you
we'll
want to
wrap this in.
if you want to wrap us up,
Yep.
I just want to put a pin in one thing. Next week, I would love to talk about expectations,
Sure. Okay.
because I think that's just a big one right now. I think
That's it.
there's a lot of folks who expect themselves to feel good during this, which is a bit of a steep expectation. There's a lot of folks who expect to learn French and learn how to play guitar left-handed and, whatever. And there's a lot of people who expect to be depressed the whole time. And those are like three things that are kind of pulling in all directions. And maybe we can just spend like an hour next week talking about that.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds good, man. I think one last thing that maybe I'd like to just intro or talk about is because we talked a little bit about just personally, what does it look like to prioritize when it comes to my time with the Lord, or I think we need to be taking care of ourselves physically, and just emotionally. But I think just to remember that right now, this is pressing us closer, into the relationships that we're around more than we normally are. And a lot of times, one of the ways that people kind of manage the tension in relationships is going to work and kind of, I'm not saying it's the best way, but it's a relief knowing that they're going to have that escape. They can come back, recalibrate. They're not having a lot of that recalibration
I
right
think a break is a break. I mean, regardless, yeah, I see what you're saying. Like that's not, maybe it's not healthy to like run away to that, but even,
now. Yeah.
my
Just help.
wife and I, in having all this extra kind of school stuff to deal with the kids, one of the things, like, she's so much better at me than this, but it's like, I'm going to take a quick walk and recenter myself. And she goes on those walks and prays and comes back like centered. And
Yeah.
the cool thing about her is she knows to go take the walk. For me, I need to be told to take the walk, but I think that's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, that's it's a different discussion, taking breaks. I think, to know that you have to cool down. I just think that, for this season is going to intensify, what it's going to expose whether the health of the relationship, or if things were a little bit rocky, this is times that could really exacerbate things, or it could really bring about more intimacy, in the relationship and camaraderie. And so I think, and we want to do our best to work with what we've got. So even if it exposes some of the negative, not to say, oh, well, that's just a sign that see how screwed up we are, okay. Like, well, you just got pushed into, a situation where you got nowhere to go really for a period of time. All right. So like, let that be sanctifying. Let's not, panic in that either, or be impulsive or give up, or, because I think there might be some impulsivity around, like even giving up on marriages. Divorce rate's really high, and I just want to encourage people, like, hey, if this is exposing, real issues, and they're coming up and you don't know where to go with them, and you kind of feel cornered in that, don't give up. There's a lot of room to grow and a lot of things you can do. And I'm hoping to talk a little bit more about that. Even what is an effective, we don't have time to do it right now, but what's an effective time out in a relationship? Because usually in a relationship, there's more of a pursuer, more of a distancer. And that's just very normal. Even if in other relationships, you were the pursuer, well, you might be less of one in this relationship, and so more of the one who's kind of like, hey, can we talk about this later? Can we talk about this later? And they're like, no, we need to do it now. We need to do it now. And that can be hard. So what does an effective break look like that considers both people's needs? I think right now, managing the weather of your relationship indirectly is so important. So research shows that if there's a 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio of interaction, 5 positives for every negative comment or interaction that you have, you're going to improve the general weather of that relationship dramatically. And so it really matters to scan for what's positive in your relationship, comment on it, appreciate it, take note of it, even if it's something that they are supposed to do anyway. That matters. It's an easy win for you to make a deposit in the account. So just
Yeah, and it's also not like I see that argument, but when I hear people who are like, well, they're supposed to do that, it doesn't mean that, you know, you can't appreciate something that's supposed to be done. Like when a restaurant, you go to a restaurant and they're supposed to cook your meal right, it doesn't mean you're not stoked when it comes out and it's awesome. So tell your wife, tell your husband, tell your kids how much you love them, how much you appreciate when they make their bed or whatever it is they do, the way they draw, the way they laugh, all that stuff. Before we close, Phil, first of all, thank you so much. I can't say it enough every week. I love getting to hear in real time how your brain works, and I love that you share all this info with us. For everyone listening at home, this week is a little bit different. We're still going to have daily devotionals every day, so you can stay connected that way. We're going to have Theology Thursday.
R&R tomorrow.
We are going to have R&R on Tuesday night live still. We're not going to have Worship Wednesday because we are going to have 2 live Good Friday services, so everyone can join along and worship there. We're still going to have Saturday Pray, which if you're at home and you're feeling like you're having a hard time connect, jump into one of those Zoom rooms and join our campus pastors and pray with them. It's great feedback coming out of that. It's awesome. It almost feels like you're really hanging out in real life praying with people. And then Sunday, we're going to gather together. I just air quoted gather together for Easter services at normal times, 9, 10, 15, 11:45, and 6:30. Those will all be live. And it's just going to be all at once. I feel so excited and like slightly heartbroken that it's not going to see all my people on Easter, but man, it's still Easter and Jesus still rose, and we are going to celebrate, all of us at our homes, and we're just going to, I hope everybody's neighborhood shakes with all the singing that's going to come out of all of these houses. So Phil, thank you. Everyone else, we'll see you next week when we talk about Phil's awesome relationship tips and a discussion that goes nowhere about expectations.
All right, man. Looking
Bye.
forward to it. See you later.